which her lyric lines soared. The next round of applause marked the end of the set, and Penny walked through the crowd, smiling and nodding hello as she went, and stood next to Banks at the bar. "That was an excellent set," Banks said. "Thanks." She didn't turn to face him. "Gin and tonic, please, Kath," she said to the barmaid. "Make it a large one." Banks could tell by her clipped tone that she thought he was just another fan, maybe even a weirdo or stalker, and she'd move away as soon as she got her drink. "You don't remember me, do you?" She sighed and turned to look at him, ready to deliver the final put-down. Then he saw recognition slowly dawn on her. "Oh, yes. It's Detective Chief Inspector Burke, isn't it? Or have you been promoted?" "Fred not, and it's Banks. But Alan will do. It's been a long time." "Yes." Penny got her gin and tonic and raised it to Banks, who clinked it gently with his pint-glass. "Slointer." "Slointer," said Banks. "I didn't know you were back in Helmthorpe." "Well, nobody put on a major advertising campaign." Banks looked around the dim lounge. "I don't know. You seem to have a devoted following." "Word of mouth, mostly. Anyway, what brought you here?" "I heard the music as I was passing," Banks said. "Recognized your voice. What have you been up to lately?" A hint of mischief came into her eyes. "Now, that would be a very long story indeed, and I'm not sure it would be any of your business." "Maybe you could tell me over dinner some evening." Penny faced him and frowned, her brows knit together, searching him with those sharp blue eyes, and before she spoke, she gave a little shake of her head. "I can't possibly do that." "Why not? It's only a dinner invitation." She was backing away from him. I just can't, that's all. How can you even ask me?" "Look, if you're worried about being seen with a married man, that ended a couple of years back. I'm divorced now." Penny looked at him as if he'd missed the point by 100 miles, shook her head, and melted back into the crowd. Banks felt perplexed. He couldn't decode the look of absolute horror he'd seen on her face. It wasn't that repulsive. A simple dinner invitation? What the hell was wrong with her? Banks gulped down the rest of his pint and headed for the door as Penny took the stage again. He caught her eyes briefly across the crowded room. Her expression was one of puzzlement and confusion. Well, he thought, as he turned his back and left, red-faced, at least she didn't still look so horrified. The night was dark, the sky moonless but filled with stars, and Helmthorpe High Street was deserted, streetlights smudgy in the haze. He walked up the cobbled Snicket, past the old bookshop, through the graveyard, and onto the footpath that would take him home, or what passed for home these days. The air smelled of manure and warm hay. To his right was a dry stone wall beside the graveyard, and to his left a slope, terraced with lynchets, led down step by step to Greatly Beck, which he could hear roaring below him. As he walked, he continued to think about Penny Cartwright's strange reaction to his dinner invitation. She always had been too ready with the sarcasm, but this had been different. Not sarcasm, but shock, repulsion. Was it because of their age difference? He was in his early 50s, after all, and Penny was at least 10 years younger. But even that didn't explain the intensity of her reaction. The path ended at a double-barreled stile about halfway up Greatly Hill. Banks slipped through sideways and walked to the cluster of old cottages over the bridge. Since his own house was still at the mercy of the builders, he'd been renting a flat in one of the holiday properties on the lane to the left. The locals had been good to him, as it turned out, and he'd got a fairly spacious one-bedroom flat, upper floor with private entrance, for a very decent rent. The irony was, he realized, that it used to be the Stedman house, long ago converted into holiday flats, and it was during the Stedman case that he had first met Penny Cartwright. Banks's living-room window had a magnificent view over the Dale, north past Helmthorpe, folded in the valley bottom. But his bedroom window looked out to the west, over a small, disused Sandemanian graveyard and its tiny chapel. Banks was a little pissed, he realized, as he fiddled with his key in the downstairs lock. The dog and gun hadn't been his first port of call that evening. He'd eaten dinner alone in the Hare and Hounds, then had a couple of pints in the bridge. Could the drinking have been what put Penny off, he wondered? He didn't slur his words or wobble when he walked. No, it had to be something else. He finally opened the door, walked up the stairs, and unlocked the inside door, then switched on the hall light. After he'd poured himself a healthy glass of Australian Shiraz, he walked over to the telephone. There was only one message, and a surprising one at that. His brother, Roy. Banks wasn't even aware that Roy knew his telephone number. "Alan? Oh, shit, you're not there, and I don't have your mobile number. If you've got one, that is. You never were much of a one for technology, I remember. Anyway, look, this is important. Believe it or not, you're about the only one who can help me now. There's something... I can't really talk about this to your answering service. It could be a matter of life and death." He laughed harshly. "Maybe even mine. Anyway, I'll try again later. But can you ring me back as soon as possible? I really need to talk to you. Urgently. Please." Banks heard a buzzing noise in the background. "Someone's at the door. I'll have to go now. Please call. I'll give you my mobile number, too." Roy left his phone numbers, and that was that. Puzzled, Banks listened to the message again. Roy sounded worried, and more than a little scared. The call was timed by his answering service at 9:29 p.m., about an hour and a half ago, when Banks had been drinking in the bridge. Roy's phone rang several times before an answering machine picked up. Roy's voice, in a curt, no-nonsense invitation to leave a message. Banks did so, said he'd try again later, and hung up. He tried the mobile number next, but got no response there either. There was nothing else he could do right now. Maybe Roy would ring back later, as he said he would. Often, Banks would spend an hour or so perched on the window seat in his bedroom, looking down on the graveyard, especially on moonlit nights. He didn't know what he was looking for, a ghost perhaps, but the utter stillness of the tombstones and the wind soughing through the long grass seemed to give him some sort of feeling of tranquility. Not tonight. No moon, no breeze. Banks turned on the TV, but as he watched, he found his mind wandering back to Roy's phone call. Felt himself waiting for the phone to ring. Willing it. There was nothing he could do about it right now, but the sense of urgency and fear in Roy's voice disturbed him. He would try again in the morning, in case Roy had simply gone out for the night. But if he couldn't get in touch then, he would head for London himself and find out just what the hell was going on. Why did people have to be so bloody inconsiderate as to find bodies so early on a Saturday morning? Wondered Detective Inspector Annie Cabbot, especially when Banks was on holiday and she was on call. She pulled to a halt behind the blue Peugeot 106 on a quiet stretch of country road halfway between Eastvale and the Owl. The morning was still and hazy, with the drone of insects in the air. It was going to be just the kind of day for a picnic by the river, perhaps a bottle of Chablis cooling in the water, maybe her sketch pad and a few sticks of charcoal. Enough of that, she thought, walking over to the car. Life had other plans for her today. Annie could see that the car's left wing had made contact with the dry stone wall, so much so that the wing had buckled and the impact had brought down a section of the wall. There were no traces of skid marks, no tyre tracks at all on the dry tarmac surface. There was already activity around the Peugeot. The road had been closed to all non-police traffic, and the immediate area around the car had been taped off. The photographer, Peter Darby, had finished photographing the body and the car, and had busied himself videotaping the immediate area. Detective Sergeant Jim Hatchley and Detective Constable Winsome Jackman were already there when Annie arrived. Hatchley standing by the roadside, and Winsome sitting half in, half out of the unmarked police car. "What have we got?" Annie asked Hatchley, who, as usual, looked as if he'd been dragged through a hedge backward. "A young woman, dead behind the wheel of her car," said Hatchley. "I can see that for myself," snapped Annie. "Bit prickly this morning, aren't we, ma'am? What's up? Get out of the wrong side of bed?" Annie ignored him. She was used to Hatchley.